inside the Postal Service.
Oh, big time.
And what members of Congress love is when one group comes in, and then the other group comes in after that. And y'all are fighting like cats and dogs. Kind of confusing. Okay?
But
And so I think that
regulations, until they're changed. I mean,
well, and let me say this. I know that oversight, obviously, Chairman Issa, chairs that committee, and I know Florida. We have a freshman colleague of mine who is serving as a subcommittee chair, which is Dennis Ross, and so they clearly know far more about that issue than I do. But I do know that in our district, because we have so many rural counties in our district, we're dealing with small post offices and the threat of those small post offices being closed. So not just the facility that we have on the major processing location that we have. So it's an issue, but it's all growing out of the same problem. We've got a postal service that that unfortunately has lost last year over $5 billion. You've got a postal service that is I think struggling to meet the changes in technology. I mean, nobody today would open up a wagon wheel company. I mean, so the challenge is
no other business has to deliver 50 miles down a rural dirt road.
I agree,
which is non-profitable. But yet we want to deliver and communicate with the whole nation.
Sure.
And so we have, like Congress has the ability to create post and post roads. Right. The question is, do you want to provide that communication? Because it's not profitable. If you privatize the post office, those people that live out in the boonies are going to have to come to the post office to get their mail. They will never see a mailman or a mail delivery truck ever again. So that's kind of a decision that
I get
is beyond us.
Well, you said an important thing. That, I mean, it is the constitutional responsibility of government. So it's not one of those things we can just go, wide out.
Our forefathers apparently thought it was
and what the Postal Service does. Let me say this. For me to mail something from here and it get to Hawaii for 42 cents, 45, excuse me.
Well, you bought the Forever.
I bought the Forever. I did buy the 45 cents. I mean, when you buy, when you just can't. If you don't increase, as long as I've been in business, I mean, there's only two ways to make money. That is increase revenues or decrease expenses.
But we can't ourselves say we want to.
No, I understand, but you have 1.2 million employees. I mean, the most expensive line item on a P&L.
But in 2006, President Bush wrote a law that he wanted to pay the Postal Service to pay for the next 75 years. People were not even born. Pay for their retiree health care in 10-year period at $5.5 billion per year.
Yeah,
that slammed us into the grave. I mean, we didn't even dig the grave.
I hear you. And let me say this, and I do think that but here's the thing on that, on retirement benefits. Okay, if you take money out of retirement benefits, okay, and you use that money to pay operations, you lose some retirement benefits.
I know, but no other agency is required to do that.
I'm sorry?
That's not good.
No. But my point is that.
But we're not taking it out of the retirement.
No, but that's because of the overpayment. Because of the overpayment. Okay, and I've heard the figure, some $75 billion.
Between 15 and 17.
Yeah. What's a billion here, a billion there? So my point is when you take money out of retirement accounts, okay, and you use that money to fund operations, when you're hemorrhaging $5 to $6 billion losses a year, when you do that, there's opportunity cost. That money that you take out of a retirement plan is not funding operations and still in the retirement plan. Okay? Now I got to tell you, y'all have the largest union in the country. Okay? And I know what the union would want. They want to fund operation, and they still want all their retirement plans to be whole. I mean, how do you do that? How That's the dilemma. And so one of the things that helps us is when the Postal Service comes and says, you know what, just like when I deal with the Air Force, we're going through sequestration right now because of the bad deal that was brokered, okay, which I didn't vote for. Okay? So now we're trying to figure out how do we survive, how do we continue to have the strongest military in the world with $500 billion in cuts? So the issue is, they're coming to us as the branches, and they're determining where they feel those cuts need to be. It's nice for all of the Postal Service to solve, to work together, and then come to us making sensible, and the word is, that's a very elusive word for a lot of people, sensible cuts. Because when you're hemorrhaging $5 billion a year, you got to make cuts.
I understand that.
So
we're the lowest organization in the world as far as postage.
Right.
I think the next lowest is 50.
Well, let me ask you this, because you asked me. So what's the solution? You work there.
What's the solution?
You work there.
Well, the solution, some of the solutions I've heard have been proposed. The 5-day delivery, which they do not want.
5-day delivery.
Okay. You're going to, because you have to cover. Everybody works normally a 40-hour week.
Okay.
Well, if you have 6-day delivery, guess what? How many more employees you need to cover that 6-day, plus sick days, plus vacation, and everything else. Okay? That would be one. The increase of the postage rate. With the post office, you run your business. You determine how much you're going to raise the cost of your service or good.
Sure.
We don't. We don't. We have to hemorrhage or do whatever. Okay? If you raise us to 50 cents a stamp, I bet we could probably do pretty good. Gas prices, as you should.
Absolutely.
Okay, it affects the boy who's cutting the lawns. What do you think it's doing to the Postal Service who's got, I don't know how many vehicles we got on the road.
I'll tell you.
Probably.
216,000.
How many?
216,000.
Okay. Times how many miles and times how many miles per gallon?
32,000 facilities and 216,000 vehicles.
I mean, there are things that can be done, but it's like the post office as a business cannot make those decisions. Those 435 people that you talked about that don't want to get anybody upset and don't want to hurt any feelings make all our decisions, and we just choke. My question was just basically simple, and I understand how we're having the feedback back and forth, is what is the point of Code of Federal Regulation? What is the regulation for?
Right.
Now, I understand they've got a draft, and they're wanting to change it. Which, if it takes you 10 days to mail a letter, I don't think you're going to start using this anymore. And so we see our future clearly. It's very clear to us. But how do you enforce a regulation? That's how simple it is. Can anybody enforce it? But since the agency writes it and changes it anytime they want, then I already got my answer before I came in here, but I wanted to.
Well, Congress delegated it to the agency.
Well, and that's what I think Congress did. I think Congress created a fourth branch of government.
Right.
The fourth branch of government was giving the power to run these agencies without any congressional oversight. And I think that that's not working out so well.
It's a no-win situation.
No, I hear you. And let me say this.
And so does Bill Smith.
And I know Bill does.
And
I know, it is. And I've talked to the postmasters in these rural counties who've been serving these communities for a long time. These rural communities, Bascom. I mean, my grandmother was born in Bascom. Okay? I mean, I don't want that little community to lose this post office on my watch.
Down the flag and holding it up.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. And so the postmaster for Crawfordville was in my office this week. So it is an issue that bothers me greatly. And I think that, look, if there's a way to streamline, whether it's 5-day delivery or those ideas, but at the same time, if we can utilize, if there are monies that aren't needed, that you have overpaid, and I've heard people use the term overpaid in order to get through this difficult time. But it's kind of like I want to see a long-term plan, not an immediate impulse to solve it short-term. I want a long-term plan because this is going to be the operational challenges of the Postal Service are not going to go away if you get over this hump this year. How are you going to be a viable organization that honors the Constitution for another 100 years?
Well, who's making the decision? Because nobody's fighting off on the 5-day limit. Why do we need 6-day limit? So none of these suggestions are even being heard. Well, they're being heard, but I think they're falling on deaf ears. We need other questions.
I have a question back here with Hal.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, no.
We didn't get around to this little spot. I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why didn't you, my name's John Latham, Panama City Beach resident and liberty activist. Why did you support reauthorization of the USA Patriot Act? Both you and Obama are identical on that.
I've often been considered identical to Mr. Obama.
On that issue?
No, first of all, the Patriot Act, the three provisions that you're talking about, the three provisions dealt with foreign individuals coming into this country. It did not deal with American citizens. It dealt with foreign individuals. And the last time I checked, our Constitution did not protect the rights of foreign individuals, only American citizens. And when there are foreign individuals in this country, I want to know who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. And so those three provisions dealt with foreign individuals. Like the lone wolf provision. That was the three provisions. Now, the overall bill is in committee right now. It is being combed through. It is being examined. It's not my committee of oversight, but it will be something that will come before me. And I'm talking about the overall Patriot Act. But the three provisions that I voted on were the three provisions that I just stated.
They also apply though to anybody they consider domestically to be a threat, and that I object to because that's a lot of groups that are activists and peaceful activists. So they go out there with bullhorns, and it looks like they're pumped up, and they are. They're passionate, but they're not dangerous, and they should have a right to do that. In fact, something really disturbing is the NDAA, where they can just detain or shoot on sight if they believe for any reason that somebody's Fourth Amendment, highly object to that.
Look, the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which funds our military, it doesn't allow the federal government to shoot immediately, okay, upon any impulse. Look, I've read it. I promise you, I've read it. Okay, you're referring to Section 1021 and 1022. Okay, the definition of a detainee. Now, I believe that the language was clear, but just to make sure, I supported immediately the same week. I supported Congressman Landry's bill from Louisiana to go back in and just make sure, okay, that language, okay, was added to the bill. Buck McKeon is feeling tremendous pressure from those of us who have supported that piece of legislation, Congressman Landry. And by the way, the NDAA bill is up for renewal each and every year. So, I was on Bernie Thompson's show last week, and I made it crystal clear that if they don't address those of our concerns with the Landry language and put it into the 2013, I'm going to have an issue, and I will not support it based on their comment to us. They would put it in there, and if they haven't done it in that year, then I will not. So, but I read the language. I studied it. And as far as your point on the three provisions of the Patriot Act, I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think that those three provisions dealt with foreign individuals that were here that have no rights under our Constitution.
It's very vague. I don't know if you're familiar with the two most recent executive orders that President Obama...
Well, it's hard for me to follow them. They're flying out of the White House.
There's two that concern me. One is a resources bill where they can, and look it on whitehouse.gov, where they can just appropriate your land in peacetime.
I understand.
That violates the Constitution.
And just to let you know, Sandy Adams, freshman congressman from Orlando, has put a bill on the floor to address that single executive order. I am a co-sponsor on that bill because at no point in time do I want the President of the United States to have total access to our natural resources without having to communicate with Congress. So, therefore, I'm already on that bill. I'm a strong believer, so you and I agree.
What about the most recent one where if anywhere the Secret Service controls and they don't have to tell you, it's a felony to protest?
Well, and you're referring to
I think it's 734. I don't have my
734.
notes.
No, 374.
Or 374. I don't have my notes.
I will say this: you can protest. I mean, you're stretching it a little bit, and you know you are. Okay, you're stretching. No, you won't.
I go out there. I'm in D.C. with a sign.
I understand, but let me say this: I don't think the American people, when you have the leader of the free world, be he Democrat or Republican, okay, I don't think that the American people think it's unreasonable that you can't stand on the hood of the limousine.
Well, I agree with you on that.
Well, I'm just telling you you got to make sure that when we do have the leader of the free world, it is our responsibility to protect him. And when you have the President of the Senate, and when you have the Speaker of the House, who's the third in line to the White House, okay, you can't stand in front of his desk. I think that's reasonable.
I agree with you on that.
Okay, look, man, the calls are coming into my office. I get it, and I communicate.
I was out picketing the Million Mom March a while ago. It was when Clinton was president. But anyway, the Secret Service came up to me, and my fear is that if they give them more power, they'll be more abusive. They threatened to arrest us. And there's a bunch of guys there with signs and a bullhorn, and just.
I think.
It's a big joke. I mean,
look,
it's
you
really
got.
not a threat.
I am very sensitive to Americans' due process rights. Okay, and let me say this: that I am also. I do not want the federal government to have more and more power to where it can invade your lives. They have a responsibility, they have a responsibility to explore without violating your rights. I get that. It's a fine line, okay? But if you think that I'm going to vote down a piece of legislation that follows individuals who aren't from this country, when they're in this country, you and I are just going to agree to disagree on that one.
Okay. What about the Border Patrol checkpoints on I-10? Are you familiar with?
I'm not.
Okay. In West Texas and New Mexico, I went to California about 5 months ago on a martial arts trip, which is an unrelated thing. But anyway, I went out there through one in New Mexico and then coming back through both New Mexico and West Texas. These are 50 to 100 miles inland. They're not on the border, mind you. They asked me my citizenship. They ran a dog around the car, and then I had an agent tell me to roll down my window. He wanted to look at my luggage, and I said what I always say to those guys. I said, I believe in the Constitution. I don't consent to searches of my vehicle, my person. Am I free to go, or am I being detained? And he said, you're free to go. Go. That I object to on the border. Yes, to not let them in the country. 100% get that, but inside that. Doesn't make any sense. And it has been ruled constitutional because they're stopping every vehicle. That's the latest ruling on it that I've read. But I don't like that. I don't see a reason for it. It's intrusive. I don't like showing my papers in a free country.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you there.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's part of why they're doing that is part of the Patriot Act.
Well, again, that's not the part of the Patriot Act that we voted on. Okay? The part of the Patriot Act that you're referring to is the part of the Patriot Act that is under review right now in committee. The three provisions that I voted on dealt with foreign individuals. So I think that, and again, I think that we got foreign individuals on our soil. I want to know who they are, where they're going, and what they're doing there.
Would you support legislation to keep them, like the Border Patrol or anybody putting up checkpoints from doing that to Americans?
Well, sure. I mean, this is I'm very concerned with the TSA. Okay.
Well, I agree with you on that. That's
I think you and I would agree on a lot more. But it's always intimidating when people stand up and ask me a question, start filming. It's so you know what? They're looking. Just like you feel that you have rights, I feel I have rights. Okay?
I don't edit my videos, by the way.
No, I'm just telling you, that's not how to win friends and influence people.
Right.
Okay? So it just is what it is. Like our Democratic buddy over here, it's just not how you win friends and influence people, and they keep wondering why they keep losing. I'm sorry?
I believe we have to hold government accountable and get things on the record. That's how I feel about it. I mean,
I don't think you've got a problem getting me on the record for anything.
okay.
Okay?
Okay.
I mean, if you unless you're living in a cave somewhere, okay? My mom gets tired of hearing me on the radio. So that's just part of it. I think we had a couple over here.
All right, thank you.
That lady right there.
But great questions. Look, I don't mind. I think you can tell I've done my homework on those issues. So and again, I want to educate you on the Sandy Adams bill regarding natural resources. It's a good piece of legislation. That's why I immediately signed off on it.
Okay, as long as it supports the Constitution, protects everybody, all their constitutional rights.
It prevents the president from having total control over the natural resources of this country.
Okay.
That was the issue you stated.
Okay.
My name is Myra Elliott, and I want you to know we're glad to have you where you are. We're
Thank
so
you.
glad you got elected. We wish that everybody up there was like you.
Well,
I have
the barbers don't want that.
I have a crazy question that has been on my mind ever since the last election.
Okay.
Do we not have a supreme authority somewhere in our government that investigates the people that are running for our higher offices and make sure they're qualified?
Well, that's a fair expectation. You know, one of the things that I think our forefathers intended with our First Amendment was freedom of the press. And they really believed that it was the responsibility of the press to vet, and that the press would do their job, and they would do so in a way to report the news, not to direct public policy by the way they reported the news as they interpreted it. And so therefore it is the responsibility of the people to interpret. It is the responsibility of journalism to report it. And I think we saw in the last presidential election, unfortunately, for all intents and purposes, there's a lot of journalism, true journalism, that is dead. There was a lot of things that I think our forefathers would be aggravated about, that it's just simple to ask very good questions, you know. And I think that a lot of people we're still learning, you know, things about many people that should be vetted. And I think that the vetting experience and having people that, look, I got to tell you, I mean, I think that for the president's budget to not have one single Democrat vote in the Senate, not one last year, it went down 97-0. Okay? Now, the same week that went down 97-0, the Republican budget passed the House. But on the front page of every newspaper above the fold, okay, was trying to demonize the Republican conference for Paul Ryan's budget committee's path to prosperity. And it talked about how it passed the House and really talked all about it and tried to paint it in a way that really was less than truthful. But nowhere, not on the comment page, not on the obit page, not on the editorial page, nowhere did it mention a single word, any of the papers, regarding the president's own budget not garnering one Democrat vote in the Senate. That is how the news media affects the perception of different officials.
They all want to stay in business.
Well, you know, look, I think
She said it right.
I think the newspapers have a real challenge. I mean, there's one newspaper in this country that's going in the right, that's, and I'm talking about as a business, that's profitable and growing. It's the Wall Street Journal.
Well, they're scaring us to death because they're giving us a horrible picture. They're paying Congress and the president as the rich guys in town and the ones the haves and we're the have-nots.
Sure.
There's no equality, no plan. They don't have to take Obama's own health care. But we do if it passes. Don't let it.
Well, this week was an interesting week, obviously in D.C. with the Supreme Court hearing the arguments regarding the constitutionality of the health care bill Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. They will deliberate over the next few months and hopefully render a decision sometime around June or July. And it's going to be fascinating to watch. I think that, but it is a Pandora's box. When when they agreed that the Commerce Clause gives the federal government the right to mandate that the American people must purchase. And so, you know, I disagree. It is where do you stop? Where do you draw the line? And it is very dangerous. And whatever we do in solving our solutions going forward, it must honor the Constitution. And so, and the President has shown just a blatant disregard for the Constitution. I think he's got a body of work that proves that out. Whether it's the 1973 War Powers Act, which he ignored in our operation and our participation in Libya, whether it is the recess appointments when we're actually not in recess, it is just a blatant, or whether it is to continue to push the American people the Right of Conscience Act, you know, under the health care bill. So the President has shown that he has very little disregard, you know, for the letter of the Constitution.
He's not one of us. When he's through winning, I said go back to Kenya.
One more?
Would you impeach him if you had the votes of the Senate?
Well, look, let's impeach him in November.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is your government. You get the government that you choose. You get the government, okay? And so therefore, you got an opportunity. Write me out. You got an opportunity to impeach everybody you don't like serving. All right? So do it. Do it. And you can do anything you want to. Remember, I'm the first Republican to win this seat since 1882. And you do things when you want to. And so therefore, do it. And if you're not happy with the President of the United States, then vote him out. And so we have an opportunity. Okay? But
He may get reelected, but the Republicans may get
well, look,
seats in the
the
Senate.
President has been clear. He uses, it's kind of like the media, he reports what he wants to report. I mean, for the President to say we have a Republican Congress, well, you know and I know there are two houses. One is controlled by Democrats and one is controlled by Republicans. Okay? But he's taken advantage on the American people that don't remember civics.
He's a good talker.
So anyway, he's very good talker. And so therefore, but I'm not interested in what the President says. I'm interested in what he does. Talk is cheap. Watch what he does. And what the President is doing is being true to his word and fundamentally transforming America.
Right.
And he doesn't like us. And that's okay. And why doesn't he like us? He doesn't like us because we stopped him legislatively. We rescinded his blank check. He no longer can pass bills at 2 in the morning that are 2,600 pages long, that we don't know what's in them. And so he doesn't like me, and if I serve for one term, I will always be proud that I was there to rescind his blank check from having ultimate king-like power of the federal government. However, he pivoted, and now he's moving full court press in the regulatory areas through the departments and through rules. So we have one more. Bill?
Good evening, Congressman Southerland, Bill Fitzgerald, Lynn Haven. I'm a local realtor, and nothing really affects my business and my cost of doing business greater right now than fuel costs. And the trickle-down effect of $4 and perhaps $5 a gallon gas, I think I think we can expect to stall in the economy even more. And you mentioned you were on the Resources Committee, and you mentioned Keystone XL, and you shared some information on your PowerPoint. But can you tell us how you really feel about oil exploration in the United States? The president is making a lot of hay over this business about we're now pumping more oil domestically than we've ever done before. Yet he fails to mention that it's all on private land and very little on public land. So can you just maybe explain a little bit about what you think, where you think this $4 a gallon gas is coming from? Do you see an end in it? And what do we got to do to get back to normal?
Well, I think first of all on the gas, I'm blown away that the president wants to claim credit for oil production. One thing I've learned about being on the Natural Resources Committee is that I've learned that when the Department of Interior issues a permit, that it takes 8 years for that permit to ever produce. 8 years. How long has the president been in office? 3. So, would any of the oil being produced today be able to be credited to the president? So when the president, like oftentimes the mainstream media, says to us, our oil production is high under my presidency, under his administration, is he being truthful? Kind of telling half truth. But he's not being completely honest with the American people. And so therefore, because those permits that are producing oil now were issued under the previous administration. And as you noted in your question, the majority of the production that is occurring on land in the Dakotas is in fact coming from private land. And if they could constrain them, they would. So it is. Again, I'm not interested in what he says. I'm interested in what he does. And so this president is very clear. He wants our fuel prices to continue to rise because he is, in many ways, very beholden to the environmentalists who want us to be able to utilize, wind and solar as our main, I mean, there's just a look. I think that is a. So when the president says, "I'm all the above," no, he's not. No. No, Mr. President, no, you're not. So I think it's very troublesome what the president does. The president has been very consistent in picking and choosing winners. In everything. I mean, he's going to pick the winners in Libya, but he's going to pick the losers in the Ivory Coast. He's going to pick the losers in Syria. The president is going to pick the winners in Detroit, and he's going to pick the losers in Detroit. Dodd-Frank is going to choose which community banks survive and which community banks are taken over, picking and choosing winners. The president's going to pick and choose winners. He's going to say that, he talks about oil subsidies to the oil companies. Okay? What he doesn't tell you is major corporations that fund the president, like IBM and like Google and like Microsoft, well, they receive subsidies too for research and science. But he's not talking about taking away their subsidies because the president is, again, going to be consistent. He's going to pick and choose winners. And that's what kings do. That's what dictators do. So I'm very bothered by this president and his blatant disregard of the Constitution, and that he feels he has the right to pick and choose winners. So, look, I disagree with the president. I will disagree with him. I'm not going to, I think as an individual, I have nothing against President Obama as an individual, as a husband, as a father. I think he's never disrespected me. But as a president and his policies, I disagree vehemently. And I will do so in a respectful way. Because how I disagree says as much about the president, as much about me, as it does the president. I have personal standards for me. But I'll continue to disagree, and I'll continue when I think he's wrong. But when he's right, and he's been right, like on things like the free trade agreements with Panama, Colombia, South Korea. He's right. We all agreed on repealing of the 1099 provision that would mandate that every small company file a 1099 with everyone you spend over $600 with. What an absolute nightmare. For what purpose? The president agreed, he signed it into law, and it was repealed. Well, then why, at 2 o'clock in the morning, did you rush the judge and pass a bill that had that in there to begin with? In the health care bill. That's where it was. The 1099 provision in the health care bill that had no business being in the healthcare bill. So I think that I've agreed with him where I can agree. But I will disagree where I feel I need to disagree. And he and I disagree that everything must